You don't have to be a genius to know that sensationalism sells. Clickbait headlines attract, and polarizing views stir opinions. But to see through those people that have no credibility, the ones that act like they have your best interests in mind, you need to think faster than the 99%. The majority of people are going to follow aimlessly and support those people that they idolize, not going to fact check and ask, does this person actually know what they're talking about? There's a next generation of young leaders that are coming into the picture, and they range from ages 25 to 55. They're replacing those that are retiring and moving on. They're bringing in new ideas and new views. Problem is, the masses aren't equipped to know if they're being led in the right direction or if they're being catfished. Naturally, not everyone is going to be a leader in the sense that they're going to lead these large movements, but everyone needs to learn to think like a leader, or else we're It's no secret that in today's world, there's a lot of people out there that are lost. They struggle with their identity. They don't have the confidence to make a decision and make their next move in life, or really even hold a conversation with another person. It's causing a lot of anxiety. And the sad part is, a lot of them don't even realize that if they keep living like this, they're never going to reach their full potential. In this video, I want to bring you 4 different tools or frameworks that you can use to look at the world a little bit differently, to think different from the masses, think differently than the majority, and think faster than the 99%. Number 1, understand the game that you're playing. I first heard this concept a few years back whenever I found the book from Simon Sinek, and it's called Infinite Game. In this book, he talks about that there are really 2 games that we play in life. The problem is the majority of people don't realize it. Now, in the book, he states that if there are at least 2 players, a game exists. And those 2 games are either finite games or infinite games. So let's start with finite games because that's the one that most of us are familiar with. So finite games, they're played by known players. Within these games, there are fixed rules. And before even playing in the finite games, there's always an agreed upon objective. Usually it's when time expires, it's the person that has scored the best. That's the winner and the other team is the loser. So let's just take basketball, for example. Both teams, they wear jerseys to separate themselves from each team. There's rules of the game, and then there's referees within that game to help hold everyone accountable to those rules. In this game, there's a beginning and there's an end. The team that has the most points when time expires is the winner. So infinite games, they have both unknown and known players. There are not really any agreed upon rules amongst these players. There may be laws within the game, but for the most part, they're pretty broad in terms of their boundaries. So in theory, a player can play the game however they want. They can change the way they play. They can play aggressively, or they can sit back and work on their strategic thought. It's really open to the player and how they want to play the game. The entire point of the game is to keep playing or perpetuate the game. A good example of this is marriage or friendship or really even education. I mean, if you think about it, there's no winning or losing in marriage. The point is to keep it alive. With your friendships, you don't keep score on who did this or who did that. If you do, you probably don't have a good friendship and you should probably get out of that. Now, when you talk about education, yeah, there's some finite aspects in it, but for the most part, the objective of education is to continue getting educated, continue learning, and continue growing. Now, this is where the majority of the population seems to fail. And I did this too for a very long time. You place finite rules in infinite games, and it can't be played that way. There's no winning or losing in your marriage and your friendships or education. If you keep trying to play these infinite games with finite rules, you're going to end up beat up. You're going to end up feeling defeated all the time when there is no winning or losing. It actually makes a lot of sense why a lot of people tend to struggle with this, myself included, because I think it has a lot to do with how we were brought up in the public school system. Now, like I mentioned, there are finite aspects to education. For example, technically, schooling is a finite game. You start in kindergarten and you end when you graduate. We're given these finite rules for an infinite game. You're in the playing field, the classroom, and then you have the referee, the teacher that's giving you the information. The objective is to absorb the information that the teacher or the textbook gives you, and then you take the test, A to B, and you're done. The problem is people get stuck in their lives and they stay in this A to B range. They never get from B to C because they don't have the tools to get to C. You have to learn how to continue learning. You have to learn how to play an infinite game, or else you just get left behind. And the tricky thing is sometimes these strategies that you use in this infinite game, sometimes they become outdated. You have to think more creatively, more strategically to continue playing the game. That's why it gets so hard when you get to an elite level. That margin of difference It's very, very small. Now, you can look at this in any industry. The people that are at the very top, the greatest of all time, it's very, very difficult to get to that point. Now, there are a lot of people below them that are very good, and it takes a lot to even get to that level. But as you progress, you can tell that the margin of improvement gets so much smaller. Now, this is the thing, we're taught a lot of finite strategies when it comes to going into adulthood and living your life. Win or loss, black and white, very binary strategies. Now, I want to encourage you when you feel stuck or you feel like there's an obstacle in your way, think about what game am I playing anyway? Am I playing a finite game or am I playing an infinite game? Then apply those rules to what you're trying to accomplish. Is the point of this to continue playing? Is the point of this to win or lose? It's the creative strategy that we weren't really taught growing up in a public school system. You're taught if you just execute this tactic and this tactic, theoretically, you should overcome. Tap into that strategic side of your brain. Look at other people who have done what you're going through right now and see how they accomplished it. What was their thought process? Once you know what game you're playing, you know the rules better than anyone else. Naturally, you start to think faster than 99% of the other players. The second way to think faster than the 99% is understanding the domino effect. Now, have you ever made that deal with yourself when your alarm goes off in the morning and you decide not to get up, you just hit snooze? And just like clockwork, your day is already starting off negatively. And here comes the domino effect. You plan on going to the gym first thing in the morning, but now you miss your workout and you make a deal with yourself that "Now I'll just go in the evening." But then you get busy and you don't make the time. Then you say, forget about this. I missed the gym. I'm just going to grab a pizza because I'm pissed. I'll just get back on it tomorrow and everything will be all right. The problem is when you make that deal with yourself to not take care of business today, it gets a whole hell of a lot easier to continue making that deal. The domino falls way easier because you've already established the habit. A day turns into a week turns into a month, and then you look down and 30 pounds later, you're thinking, what the hell happened to me? The domino effect is something that I came across years ago, and I'm not even 100% sure where I came across it or who taught it to me. But what I've noticed is as I've gotten older, this has so much more of an impact on me. Put it simply, it just means that every decision that you make has an impact on you down the road. Now, once you train yourself to think this way, the faster you're going to realize that how this small decision actually impacts you 10 years down the road. Yeah, of course, it's going to take you a little bit of time. It's going to be a little bit more thinking, especially if you're not used to it at first. You start to easily distinguish what decisions have a short term implication and what decisions have a long term implication. You see, that's the problem though, because the 99%, they cannot comprehend that a decision today impacts them tomorrow. Now, for all you planners out there, I'm just going to preface and say you can't fully plan out your life. Just use this as a guide to ask yourself, man, am I making the right decisions? Am I setting myself up for the 10-year goal? Or who I want to become in that long-term vision. You know, it allows you to think about other factors. Is this actually worth my time in the long run? Is it a stepping stone for me to get from this level to this level? Who does it impact? Does it impact me? Does it impact my family? What about the lifestyle that I want? Now, some of these things may end up happening and some of them probably won't, but that's part of strategic thinking. The last thing you want to do is leave yourself vulnerable because you didn't think of something. And this is especially true as a leader because when you make the wrong decision, and we all do at some point, your followers are going to come up to you and ask, man, what happened? And if your response is, I just didn't think about that happening, you're going to lose a lot of trust. You're going to look like an idiot. You want to think faster than the 99%, think in decades. Now, the third way that I have for you to think faster than the 99% is a solutions first framework. Think in solutions, not problems. See, any person can identify a problem. It's the lowest level of thinking that there is. But what many fail to do is to present a viable solution. So let's look at two people in the exact same position. You got these two guys and they both dread going to their jobs. They can't even begin to focus on the weekend with their family and their friends because all they're thinking about is that they have to show back up to this place on Monday. You got the one guy who constantly complains. He's low energy. He always has something to say about how bad it is. His partner's annoyed at how negative he is, and it just grows by the day. He complains about the traffic, the demands from his boss, the workload. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Then you have this other guy. He dissects. He says, what do I hate about this job and why? Is it my boss? Is it the actual work I'm doing? Is it the workload itself? Then he decides. If it's a dead-end job, he spends every waking moment on getting out of that job and finding a new one or starting a business. He networks with the people he knows for potential opportunities. Anytime you spot a problem, whether it directly impacts you or it's something you see from a distance, separate yourself from other people and bring a solution. It's so easy to stand out in this because most people don't even try. The 99%, they live slow. They don't act. They usually sit in their mess and they usually complain. Bring a solution, act fast, and get past the problem. And the fourth way to think faster than the 99% is to prioritize action. There's a term called mental masturbation, and Forbes defines it as the act of following intellectual ideas that are born out of excitement and or novelty, but they offer little value to you and your real life goals. That's when you do things like tell people your lofty goals without putting in any work, dive into self-improvement without actually applying anything, and really just going aimlessly through your life trying different careers without even thinking about the long-term implications or do they even fit the lifestyle that you want. You opt for the convenience rather than thinking it through. So if that's mental masturbation, how do we avoid falling into this trap? So I started doing something years ago that actually helped when I fell into this. And it's reducing the amount that you consume, but taking notes on what you consume. Now, the reason why I started doing this is because I noticed that I would read a book or I would listen to a podcast or hear someone speak, and I would instantly go to the next podcast, book, or speech or whatever it was. And I would never really absorb the information. It just felt like this endless cycle of consumption. So I just thought back, I was like, man, when I was in college, I really understood some of the concepts that I read in textbooks, but why was that? And the fact was, it's because I wrote it down. I took the notes from the book after I read it. I absorbed it a little bit. I thought about what I was seeing, and then I thought about how I could implement it into my own real life. Now, the 99%, they're going to continue doing this for the rest of their life. They're going to feel productive because they listen to a podcast or they read a book. But when you put them on the spot and you ask them questions about something that's deeper than surface level, they can't really talk about it. They don't have a deep understanding of everything. They have a lot of surface level understanding. And that's fine if you are doing something out of pure enjoyment. But if you're trying to progress in one particular area of your life, you need to have some depth. So when it comes to long form content, I want to encourage you to take notes on what you learn and maybe spend a little bit more time than you usually do on it. Think about it. How can I apply this? In fact, there's this article from Psychology Today that states the act of physically writing things down on paper is associated with more robust brain activation and better memory recall. So, okay, you're taking more steps than the general population. You're writing things down, but don't forget to apply it. This is really where people get tripped up, but this is where all the magic happens. If you can take what you learn and instantly go apply it or as fast as possible, it's going to solidify in your brain and you're going to start to really know the subject matter at a much deeper level. You're naturally going to outthink the 99% just on a sheer experience level, aside from the knowledge that you've accumulated. So now you have 4 frameworks to think faster than the 99%, but I want to leave you something that's more of a general outlook on life instead of just a framework to use. And that's a growth mindset. It's a different way than what you're going to see with the 99%, just in terms of the world and opportunities. It's all about training your mind to ignore limitations. So most people these days know the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed or scarcity mindset. A growth mindset is one that you believe you can get better at something. You can improve through dedication, effort, and time. Whereas a fixed mindset or a scarcity mindset, you believe you're good or bad at something just on your inherent nature. There's really no way to improve. So next time someone speaks to you, I want you to listen to how they frame things up, how they speak about things in their life and in others' lives. Listen to the way that they talk about their own progress or lack thereof. I'll give you this. Most people, they're stuck in a fixed mindset because they've been beat up too much. They've grown into adulthood and they've had some challenges that they weren't able to overcome. They've gotten beat up so much to the point that they've just flat out given up. They've given up without actually telling you, man, I just gave up. Goals that were once out of reach and are still technically possible, they have totally written off because they don't have the effort or the energy to keep going. You're not going to find someone successful that operates with a fixed mindset. They just don't exist. They don't last because in order to keep seeing progress, you have to expand your possibilities. You have to expand the way that your mind thinks about potential. You do this and you're going to be able to see opportunities where most don't. Look, I think about this topic a lot and what it really means to continue progressing in really all areas of life, your family, your relationships, your career, you name it. And sometimes I come to the conclusion that it's not really as hard as we think sometimes. Now, yeah, you're going to go through some times that suck and it's going to feel like, man, it'd just be easier to give up. But just take a second and look around and look at how many people are truly lazy. They do whatever they can to avoid thinking for themselves. And whatever the path of least resistance is, that's the one that they're going to take. So whenever you're in this dark spot and you feel like you're stuck, just remember the 1%, they're resourceful in their thinking. They're scrappy. They think quick and then they act. In the back of your mind, you always have to tell yourself, man, I always find a way to get through this. The pain is always temporary.